All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Very welcome to our IWEST transitions. Sorry, I'm looking at the right title. Identifying pathways to a regional carbon neutral economy. My name is Jessica Western. I'm with the University of Wyoming and Big Goose Creek Resolutions. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to John Litenski to open things up.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm John Litenski. I'm the Deputy Director for Advanced Fossil Technology Systems here at Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management in DOE. And I just wanted to thank you and everyone that's working on this project and attending this meeting. We started looking at opportunities to support the regions and communities as we look towards the decarbonization of the electricity sector and the industrial sectors. And we realize that every region, every state, every community is going to have a different perspective. They're going to want to share and make sure is incorporated in some of these planning processes. And as that is said, I think this is a very important project to us. As we want to make this more of a bottoms-up analysis of what it's going to take to actually implement a decarbonization strategy in the Intermountain West. We're supporting a similar study in the Appalachian region. Again, it's a bottom-up study where we get community engagement to inform the decision makers or the modelers before they come out with a solution that may not make sense. So sometimes models don't always do the right thing if they're not informed well. But again, it's important to us that this type of study happens because ultimately we're looking at a very large build out of either CCS infrastructure, carbon capture and storage infrastructure, or if we transition to hydrogen infrastructure, it's going to take a significant amount of investment. And really where that's going to start is, discussions like this at the community level, with industry, with state stakeholders and regional stakeholders to form those teams that are actually going to put projects in place and infrastructure in place to make these decisions happen. And if we don't do that again, and we're not well informed, it'll take longer than we have time to do that. And again, I'm happy to be talking to stakeholders in Wyoming. We've had meetings in Arizona and Colorado that I've participated in so far. And we know Wyoming is, one of the states that really is going to be innovative and looking at, solutions for that state. This is not just a fossil energy and carbon management office initiative. This is also, we have partners in our bioenergy technologies office, in our hydrogen and fuel cells office. They're all interested in looking at what it's going to take to, at least plan for these types of transitions. And ultimately, we're not looking to decide what that's going to be. It's going to come down to the different regions to make those decisions. But again, I wanted to thank you. I don't want to spend a lot of time. I just wanted to, again, encourage you, hope you have an active discussion today. I'm happy to participate in this meeting. And again, I'm sure if there's any questions for me, I'm happy to take them. But if not, again, thank you for your participation and support.
John, thanks very much. So John, you will be joining us for the rest of the meeting?
I'm going to be here for at least the next hour, and then I have another meeting. So I apologize, but I will be here for the next hour.
Okay, great. Thank you. Scott, do you have anything you'd like to bring in?
Sure. Well, I think John said it very well, but John, thank you for joining this meeting and welcome to Wyoming. Even though we're standing in Gillette virtually today, it's so humble to stand in this community. It is the energy capital of the world. And so we know as these discussions go forward and as the nation begins to decarbonize, it's going to affect this community quite a bit, not just the state in general, but this community. So it's so humble to stand here and have these discussions. And I really appreciate the Department of Energy's approach of taking a bottom-up look at some of these issues, because I think these communities have, it just is generally going to affect their way of life. So John, thank you for the program, and I look forward to engaging in discussion today.
All right, thanks very much, Scott. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Selena, and Selena will be providing you with an introduction to the IWEST project.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen here. You can all hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Perfect. And let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep, I can see.
Perfect. All right. So I just want to let you all know a little bit about the IWEST project, which is the project that we're doing these workshops under. It is a DOE funded project, and it's being led by our partners down at Los Alamos National Lab. And it is a multi-state partnership. So we're partnering with people from Montana, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and here in Wyoming. And the big objectives of the project, we're developing a technology roadmap. So we want to develop a plan for transitioning the Intermountain West to carbon neutral economy, carbon neutral energy economy, and not just any, but an economically sustainable one. And our goal is to think about this in the next 15 years. How can we start to transition this energy system in the next 15 years? And in doing that, as part of this project, we really want to build this regional coalition of people that can work on this together, a network of people that have the expertise and are in the places that can start to make this happen. Like I said, we're working with partners across the Intermountain West. We've got Arizona State University, University of Utah, University of New Mexico, San Juan College, Colorado School of Mines, Montana State University, New Mexico Tech, as well as Resources for the Future, and NETL, as well as, of course, Los Alamos National Lab and DOE, all working on this together. And just to say a little bit more about how we're going about this project, similar to what John already said, is we really want to take a place-based approach. So we want the technologies that we're considering to be relevant to the region and to the communities that they're really going to affect, and to make sure that we're taking into account all the concerns of those communities and what the needs and goals are of the communities. As I said, we're focusing on carbon neutral technologies. So not exclusively, but some of our focuses are carbon capture, utilization and storage, carbon neutral hydrogen, and bioenergy. And where we're really starting with this is the regional outreach and engagement, which is what we're doing right now. So talking to these communities that are going to be affected by these plans and getting input from people in them, and then incorporating that into that plan that we're developing over about the next year. We'll be developing that. So that is all that I have. And I would be happy to pass this over to Rajesh. I think I saw that you were on the call with us. He's our principal investigator over at Los Alamos. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
Well, thank you, Selena. I don't have much to add other than thank you all for participating and giving us your time and your input. It is going to be valuable in terms of our overall objectives as Selena has defined. So I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to participating in discussions with you during this workshop.
Thank you, Raj.
Thank you both. Are there any questions for Selena and Rajesh about the IWEST project? Right, I'm not seeing any. I got a little notice that there's a little feedback coming from me. If you guys keep hearing it, please let me know and I'll see what I can do. In the meantime, I would like to hand it over to Kip Coddington, who is going to be talking about federal and state policy. Kip, you want to share your screen?
Will do, Jessica. Thank you very much. And I'm assuming you can hear me as well.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so I would like to, first of all, I would like to thank the sponsors. Rajesh, we're indebted to you. It's a privilege to be team with Los Alamos National Lab on this, as well as our colleagues at the U.S. Department of Energy and coworkers and colleagues here at the University of Wyoming. So my name is Kip Coddington. I am the director of the Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis at the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. And I have the privilege of setting the stage for this workshop by just trying to the best of my ability to explain some of the law, policy, and commercial drivers for this concept of carbon neutrality, and to try to explain why we are having this discussion to begin with. And again, I'm talking to friends, colleagues, and community members in the city of Gillette, which is the energy capital of the world. So, you know, it's times like this, I feel like I'm the bat boy who's giving hitting advice to Babe Ruth. So you are the energy experts up there. So you've heard this all before. So I will begin without apology. But in case there are others on the phone, I did just want to set forth some basic principles. So as we all know, the state of Wyoming is a prodigious producer of energy, both fossil and renewable, but a huge amount of it is fossil energy. Indeed, among all the states, Wyoming is the #1 net exporter of energy. And of course, the good folks in Gillette already know that. And you also know that we export nearly all of that energy. And that is, of course, relevant because it means our state and our state's economy is largely dependent upon energy policies over which we have little to no control. Our customers are largely outside of the state, and so we are beholden to the policies and preferences in those states. And I just wanted to give an example of that. So this is a map of the United States, obviously, and it shows the number of states that have what are effectively renewable portfolio standards and or renewable or carbon related mandates that apply to the generation and or sale of electricity. And these standards come in many different forms, and that's not relevant for purposes of this discussion, but the different forms and styles of this type of regulation is indicated by the different colors on this map. And I could show similar maps for other types of low carbon programs from cap and trade. I could put up a map of the United States and to show cap and trade programs, which of course is a type of climate regulation. And that would show the Western United States. It would also show New England. I could put up another map that would show states that have enforced or are looking at low carbon standards that apply to transportation fuels, and on and on and on. But from this map, you can see that at least with respect to electricity, we are surrounded by states that have enacted state-based policies that look at the flavor of the fuel that those electricity providers must use or can use, and so those impact us. And indeed, the state of Wyoming, as we all know, the state of Wyoming, to its credit, has been an energy leader for decades. And so a couple of years ago, the Wyoming legislature enacted its own version of a low carbon electricity standard in the form of House Bill 200. And those rules are effectively finalized by the Wyoming Public Service Commission, which is the regulatory agency tasked with implementing those standards. So as we sit here today, even the state of Wyoming now should be colored in as one of these states that has adopted low carbon S-type standards applying to the generation of electricity. And of course, there are many other low carbon policy drivers well beyond what is occurring at the state level. So let's begin with federal requirements. Wyoming, of course, is subject to federal law, as are the states in which we are exporting the various forms of our energy. And back in 2007, in a seminal decision by the U.S. Supreme Court entitled Massachusetts versus EPA, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that greenhouse gases collectively, which of course would include carbon dioxide, which is produced whenever you combust any fossil fuel, and methane, which of course is natural gas, that those materials, when they are emitted to the atmosphere, are air pollutants. And air pollutants is the legal term that is used by the Federal Clean Air Act. And as such, the Supreme Court said that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency could regulate industrial emissions of those materials, including both CO2 and methane. And so thereafter, first beginning with the Biden administration, and then continuing with the Trump administration, and almost certainly to be resumed in the Biden administration, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has been regulating emissions of both carbon dioxide and methane and other greenhouse gases from both stationary sources, such as power plants, and from mobile sources, such as cars and trucks. So for those of you on this webinar from Laramie, every time you're taking your life in your hands and driving on I-80 over the hill to Cheyenne, you're passing all those 18-wheelers, and those 18-wheelers have fairings underneath and at the end in order to improve the aerodynamics of that truck as it is moving along the road. And that is to improve the fuel economy of those vehicles. And all those fairings, those wing-like structures on those trucks are mandated by federal law and are enforced by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So the ship has sailed under federal law as to whether greenhouse gases are subject to regulation. They have been subject to regulation for nearly 15 years, and they have continued to be regulated that way under both Democratic and Republican administrations. Also, of course, the state of Wyoming, the United States as a country, and all of our customers are at minimum influenced by international policy. And for decades, the countries of the world have been meeting to reach a variety of agreements and treaties on a variety of energy and environmental related topics. And for many, many years, there has been a treaty dealing with climate change. And that current international agreement was executed in 2015 in Paris and is thus called the Paris Agreement. And the United States, under the Biden administration, has re-entered the Paris Agreement. And effectively, every country on the planet is a party to the Paris Agreement. And I just wanted to read to you what the objective is of the Paris Agreement. The objective of the Paris Agreement is, and here I'm just reading, quote, holding the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees C above pre-industrial levels, and pursuing efforts to limit that temperature increase to 1.5 degrees C. And so that objective is expressed in terms of a temperature increase. Scientists have interpreted that temperature increase into a parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, and a 2 degrees C target amounts to about 450 parts per million of CO2 and a 1.5 degree C increase amounts to about 430 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And currently, based upon the sensor, the official sensor on the top of the volcano in Hawaii, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is 413 parts per million of CO2. And it is anticipated that we will reach the 450 ppm Paris Agreement target by no later than the year 2040. And so the Paris Agreement is a bottom-up approach whereby countries working through national laws are striving and will be striving in the years and decade ahead to try to ensure that that concentration limit or limits are not exceeded. So that's the path we're on, whether we like it or not. And even if governments choose at some future date not to follow it, certainly many major companies are, including many of the major oil and gas companies. So we live in a Paris Agreement world. And then, of course, even if all these policies were to go away at the international level, the federal level, and our customer states, and I don't think that's going to happen. Certainly, there are a wide variety of investor preferences that are going on that are rooted, again, for better or for worse, in the DNA of major banks, investors, what have you. And some of these take the form of so-called environmental, social, and governance standards, or ESG investing. And so private investors from Wall Street to San Francisco, Cincinnati, and St. Louis, they are looking at the environmental and energy performance of the companies in which they are investing. And that also is leading companies to make decisions about fuel choice, for example. So even aside from government mandates and policies, this low carbon imperative is deeply rooted in the psyche of private sector investors, and that is certainly playing a role too. And finally, I don't want to leave you with the notion that what is going on, the challenges and opportunities facing the state of Wyoming are rooted only in law and policy. Of course, basic economics are a major driver as well. So the fuels that we are producing are competing in a highly competitive market against a wide variety of other fuel sources. So basic economics is playing a role in this as well. We're not going to talk about economics today, at least not to a great extent. I just did not want to leave you with the impression that this low carbon policy train, if you will, is driven only by law and policy. And of course, I mentioned previously House Bill 200. Wyoming has been a leader, an energy leader for decades. And quite frankly, the state of Wyoming, to its credit, has been a low carbon leader for 5, 10, 15 years, maybe more. And part of that goes back to the carbon capture and storage laws that the Wyoming legislature put in place more than a decade ago. And we can talk about that during Q&A. But more recently, as we all know, Governor Gordon announced his net negative CO2 emission goal. And here I'm not going to read this, but he stated this earlier in his State of the State address, and that is a bold, ambitious, and quite frankly, technically challenged, opportunity that he has presented the state with, and again, that sets the context for this IWEST program as well. I just wanted to briefly end, this program is focused on carbon neutrality. It's interesting that Governor Gordon's goal was expressed in terms of net negative, and I just wanted to leave you with this notion that those terms don't necessarily have precise definitions. And here in Wyoming, the Wyoming Energy Authority is currently in the midst of rolling out and revising and working on a more detailed strategy to put meat on the bones of this net negative goal. For purposes of this workshop, however, we're going to be focused on and using the term carbon neutral And here I've got a definition that I think is consistent with what those in the IWEST program were using. And it is that carbon neutral means you have net zero carbon dioxide emissions, and you're basically balancing out what is going up in terms of the atmosphere, in terms of CO2 emissions, with what you're able to take out and or sequester. So just like the term neutrality means, it's balancing out the atmospheric burden of carbon. And of course, as the atmospheric concentrations of CO2 continue to increase, I do think we're heading into a policy and technology environment where efforts are going to have to be placed in removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And that'll get to technology such as direct air capture and the like, which Scott and others will be talking about separately later in this program. Just also to set the stage for the later discussion in the workshop, it's interesting to think about whose emissions we're talking about here. And generally for a long time, policy experts, attorneys, and others and engineers have categorized atmospheric emissions into three categories: Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from facilities that are under the direct ownership or control of a corporate entity, for example. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions associated with the purchase, for example, of electricity that someone else is generating. And Scope 3 emissions are all other indirect emissions. And here I list some of those. I'm not going to read them. One thing that is interesting for the state of Wyoming, for example, with respect to its own net negative policy goal, is Wyoming going to take responsibility for the CO2 emissions associated with the use and combustion of fossil fuels by others? And it's not clear to me that is how that is going. But if we are going to take responsibility for that and somehow account for it, that will in fact be quite a significant challenge for us, I believe. And of course, then all of this gets us to the proverbial energy transition. Energy transition to me is one of those words that can sound, sounds intimidating, but to me, energy systems have always been in a state of transition, and so this is not a term that scares me. It does create obviously challenges for the state. I also think it creates tremendous opportunities, and the state of Wyoming has been a leader in energy again for decades, and I expect that to continue. And we've already seen in the great community of Gillette not only a long history of energy leadership, but through the Carbon Valley Initiative and others. I will hook my wagon onto the locomotive that's being led by the community of Gillette on energy transition, any day of the week and twice on Sundays. But this will be a very interesting discussion today. And so that gets us to what are the technology paths that a community like Gillette, which quite frankly, it's already pursuing, as previously noted, but we'll be discussing those in greater detail. What might some of those technology paths be? And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Scott. So Scott, I'm going to hand the baton to you.
No, not so fast there, Kip.
Oh, yeah, so I will pause and see if there's, I apologize if I was speaking too quickly. I am known as a fast talker, but does anybody have any questions that I can briefly answer?
Any questions for Kip Coddington? It always takes a minute when you're on a Zoom call, so I'm just giving it a mo, just in case. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. There's lots of other times to ask questions, so no worries. Scott, thank you very much, Kip. And
You're
Scott,
welcome, Jessica.
you want to go tell us about technologies, please?
Sure, let me take control of the screen. And I'm assuming you can hear me and you can see the screen. Perfect. I got a thumbs up. All right. So I'm Scott Cullen. I'm the Senior Director of Research here at School of Energy Resources. And Kip, thank you for setting such a stage so that we can have this discussion. But the great thing is when you start talking about research is all of a sudden the conversation flips to being forward-looking. We get to look out over the horizon. We get to start looking at those technologies, those innovations, and developing ways to meet the challenges that are in front of us. And if there's anything I know about the community of Gillette is that they also share that view. So it's thank you again for having us here today. So I just wanted to start with some guiding language, what we're using here at the School of Energy Resources and at the state level. First, let's just look at the Wyoming Energy Strategy. It's not perfect and it's new and it's evolving, but I think it, like Kip said, like the governor's challenge, it's pretty bold. And it's a fossil energy state attempting to get out in front and making sure that they can have a voice at the table and making sure that they're going to have products that others want to sell. So the Wyoming Energy Strategy, it really boils down to the North Star of this. And that's continuing to power our nation with the all of the above net zero energy mix. So it isn't just focusing on one single energy technology, but it's putting them all together. And at the end of the day, supporting them all and making sure that we can get to that net zero. I'll also leave you with the mission that we have here at School of Energy Resources. We start with it every day, but our mission here is energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming. So when we sit back and we start thinking about how in the heck does a state like Wyoming meet decarbonization goals? We've really kind of put it into four buckets. I use five. The first one being low carbon fuels. So it's looking at responsibly produced gas, gas with lower methane emissions, gas processing facilities with carbon storage or carbon capture and storage. It's looking at things like carbon negative oil or low carbon oil. One that we're pretty excited about, and I think it's going to bring a lot of opportunity to Wyoming, is hydrogen. And I'll go into that. It's bolded because I'm going to pick that as one of the topics that we go into just a little bit deeper. Let me skip down to low carbon electricity. When we start looking at the carbon emissions for the state of Wyoming, it's pretty obvious that the elephant in the room is fossil fuels being burned to generate electricity. So we need to look at technology solutions for that bucket. As you get down further, looking at electrification, eventually electric vehicles and how you can electrify some of our industrial sectors, perhaps like Trona, perhaps like bentonite mining, but there's some options there. But the last one I want to talk about with this group today is new coal. And that's taking coal and doing something else with it besides burning it. It doesn't really have a carbon emission with it, but I think when we're talking about Wyoming and we're talking about coal, it's got to be part of the narrative for the future. So I throw that in as our fifth bucket for decarbonization. So with that, I've bolded three terms there: hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, and the new coal. So those are the three I'm going to focus on today, but happy to talk about any of these in the discussion part of the work. So let's start with carbon storage. Wyoming's carbon neutrality isn't just about Wyoming. If you look on the map on the left, that shows the Powder River Basin, and somebody has taken the opportunity to show us where in the United States Powder River Basin coal is being shipped and eventually being burned. So if you look on the map at the right, you can easily start to match up those locations with the emission sources that are being shown on the heat map. Now, the part that strikes me is that if you look underneath those emission sources, there are crosshatches. Those are marking saline aquifers that have the potential to store carbon or carbon dioxide emissions. So just about anywhere in the United States where we're shipping Powder River Basin coal and it's being burned, proximal to that location, there's potential for carbon storage. Now, a lot of these emission sources are switching from coal to natural gas. That gets them a 50% reduction in their carbon footprint. But it also makes it more difficult to capture the CO2 out of the stream just because it's more dilute. So I think now that we're looking at not just reducing CO2 emissions, but going straight to zero, it may make sense for a lot of these utilities to reevaluate carbon storage on those facilities before evaluating fuel switching to natural gas. Okay, let me bring it back to the state. Let's look at where our point source CO2 emissions are across the state. They really fall into three large buckets. One is electricity generation. The second one are these yellow power plants that you see down here. That's our Trona industry. And then we've got a few gas processing facilities, some refining, and some cement across the state. But again, the elephant in the room is our electricity generation, and it's mainly from coal-fired power. Same map, let's just add a little bit more data. So on this map, you're seeing on the pink polygons, these are our geologic basins. We've evaluated all of these for the potential to store carbon dioxide, and we found locations in each one of those basins. The pink dots on here are now showing you those point source emissions, but the size is relative to the overall emission that they're emitting. On this map also, you'll see this purple line. This is the existing CO2 network that we have in the state. It's already moving CO2 throughout the state. These dotted lines show us where the Wyoming Pipeline Corridor Initiative has creative rights of way for additional CO2 pipelines once the CO2 is available. So the numbers on this map, 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are the locations of the carbon storage projects that we're working on. You can see we've picked them geographically so that they're near point source emissions, and they're also in the basins where we need to store carbon dioxide. So the first one, the one that this crowd's most familiar with, is Wyoming Carbon Safe Project at Dry Fork Station. Number 2, at the Rock Springs Uplift, this location has the ability to store about 25 billion tons of CO2. It's a really large saline structure, so we're looking at that for a CO2 storage hub. Number 3, these are really large oil and gas fields in the fold and thrust belt that have kind of reached the end of their economic life. They're really large reservoirs. The infrastructure is already in place. The compression's already in place. So we're working on turning those fields over to CO2 storage fields, basically putting the carbon back in the ground where it came from. And then number 4 is one I'm really excited about. We're teamed with an industry partner on a blue hydrogen project in the Southern Powder River Basin. That would be about a 200 million standard cubic feet per day facility of hydrogen and about 1.4 million tons of CO2 if it comes to fruition. So Kip, you mentioned the Carbon Valley. I really want to thank the leadership of this community and the forward thinking about Carbon Valley and what you guys have done with it. What does it mean for me, carbon capture and storage expert, or self-named carbon capture and storage expert? But if you zoom in on this community or on this location here, you'll see Dry Fork Station right here at the star. This is the location of the Wyoming Carbon Safe Project. This is a 25-mile radius circle drawn around Dry Fork Station. Every one of these little polygons in blue and green, these are oil fields that are now at the end of their economic life and now need a source of CO2. So these are potential for CO2 storage, CO2 EOR. At Dry Fork Station, of course, we're looking at carbon capture and storage at that location. You also have the Integrated Test Center, which is looking at carbon capture and carbon utilization research. And now under construction in this community here is the Wyoming Innovation Center that's looking at coal to products, and the first project that will be placed there, I hope, will be our rare earth element extraction project. So one more slide on Carbon Safe. I know everybody here is familiar with it, but it is our flagship project. Really excited to have this in the community. Dry Fork Station is one of the newest, cleanest coal-fired power plants built in the US. It's not one of those plants that has a shortened life. It's going to go through 2070. So focusing on this power plant, being able to do the research around carbon capture and carbon storage at this location, I really think that we can show the nation and the world what the future of coal could be. So let me go to a new topic, hydrogen in Wyoming. This has been popping up in a lot of discussions. What is hydrogen? So it's an energy carrier. You can make hydrogen either through splitting water molecules, or you can make hydrogen by taking a hydrocarbon feedstock and splitting off the hydrogen from it. So those are things like natural gas and coal. And you quickly get into the hydrogen discussion, you start talking about colors. So you've heard people throw out blue hydrogen or green hydrogen, and now in Wyoming, we're starting to talk about pink hydrogen. So blue hydrogen is hydrogen that comes from a natural gas molecule or coal. You break off the carbon and you harvest the hydrogen out of it. Green hydrogen is hydrogen that comes from a renewable source like wind or solar, and you're splitting water molecules. Pink hydrogen is taking the electricity from a nuclear power plant and using that for electrolysis and making hydrogen. But what's the great thing about hydrogen is it's a no carbon fuel. It can be shipped and it can be burned in place of other carbon intensive fuels. So what we're talking about in Wyoming is, you know what? Wyoming could be a headwater state for hydrogen. We could make hydrogen here in the Powder River Basin out of coal and ship it, take it all the way to Pneumonia and ship it on the rail cars that are leaving the Powder River Basin every day. In Southwest Wyoming, where you have a lot of natural gas production, you can make hydrogen there and blend it into the existing natural gas pipeline network, which I'm showing here. And we've got some really key markets that leave Wyoming that hit Washington and Oregon, Northern California, Southern California. So we're looking at those pipelines first as a blend, but the eventual 100% conversion over to hydrogen shipments. Changing the narrative on coal. This is what I'm calling new coal. So here at the School of Energy Resources, we do have the carbon engineering program. This program is focused really on figuring out new ways to use coal besides burning it. And I know a lot of the folks in the community are familiar with this program, but I think it's something that's unique to Wyoming and really important to Wyoming. So we've got the coal refinery that we've been building. It just grew out of the lab. We've moved it out to an offsite demonstration to finish the demonstration on it. But really, it's combining a solvent extraction process with pyrolysis to give us some really neat coal chars and some basic building products that we can use to make turn coal into other materials. So we're looking at things like agricultural products. We're looking at things like making paving, asphalts, roof tiles. We've got some construction materials that we're making out of it. One of those pieces is the coal brick. So if you've been to the campus of University of Wyoming here lately, you've been able to hold a coal brick. We've made about 4,000 of them in the last couple of months, and we're as fast as we can constructing what we're calling the coal house here on the University of Wyoming campus. So soon we'll have this house up and operating. We'll be able to test it against the elements. We'll be able to test it on heat and thermal comparisons against regular building materials. So we're pretty excited about this program. And Jess, I know you're winking at me, so I'm trying to speed up here. So the other part about changing the narrative on coal is we're really looking at other things that are in there of value. And one of those is rare earth elements. And we've been doing a lot of work here in the Powder River Basin, specifically identifying where these deposits or ore bodies of rare earth elements lie. And we're starting to realize that you can connect them from mine to mine. And so we may have a basin-wide distribution of these elements. The neat thing about these is we need these for a new green economy. We need these for batteries, for non-reflective glass. We need these to build wind turbines. So I really do think that the mining that is in the DNA of every Wyoming individual could be put to work on rare earth elements. Jess, one more slide, if I may. I just want to highlight a few other low carbon technologies that are ongoing, projects that are ongoing here in Wyoming. We need to highlight what's going on with Ramaco over in Sheridan, where they're taking coal and making high value materials. The recent announcement of the TerraPower Natrium reactor and its location soon to be determined at a aging coal-fired power plant. Recently, we've teamed with Williams on a Southwest Wyoming green hydrogen hub. So that could be upwards of $1 billion investment in Wyoming. And then lastly, we're teamed on a few direct air capture products where we're looking at taking CO2 directly out of the atmosphere and storing it in our great reservoirs here in Wyoming.
But you're doing just fine. If you need a couple more minutes, it's fine.
Oh, okay, sorry, I rushed that last slide, but I am done. I'll pause for questions.
All right. Well, that was a lot of information from Kip and Scott. Let's hear what questions you have for them.
So Jess, I have a question for Kip.
Yes.
I want to know who his hairdresser is. He's got a new haircut today. So that was a bad joke, I know, but really we want to frame this discussion as being interactive. We want as much feedback as we can possibly get from this community so that we can take it up to the state level and to the national level.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Scott. I was just wondering, on slide number 7, on your map, there's this dotted line that is identified as a WPCI pipeline. What the heck is that? And I'm deeply concerned because there are a bunch of them going across the Bighorn Basin.
So Jess, great question. So that's what's called the Wyoming Pipeline Corridor Initiative. So that was probably a decade-long project spearheaded by the governor's office to work with BLM, and Kip will correct me on the legal terms here, but to work with BLM to create federal rights of way so that future CO2 pipelines, if or when they're needed, could be built much quicker. And great question or great observation going to the Bighorn Basin. It's difficult to get there from here. As everybody in Wyoming knows, you either have to go over the Bighorn Mountains or the Owl Creeks. So having a pipeline corridor that connects the Bighorn Basin and the large oil fields that are there is pretty important.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Any other questions? Let me look at the front row.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat.
Yeah, so from Mike McGurk to you, Scott, I think, do we know what technology, excuse me, what technology is being used for DAC by Climeworks?
So Jess, they're asking for the direct air capture technology that has been chosen by Climeworks. I am not familiar with the specific technology, but it's the same one that opened operations, I think just yesterday in Iceland. So Google it, and that would be, I would defer to anybody else on the line that knows more.
Okay, yeah, Michelle, you have a question?
Hi there, Michelle V. Hill from the University of Wyoming Extension. And do you guys have a map of this stuff, of the current projects and stuff on your website so that I can refer to these once I'm finished? Like what's going on, current projects within the state, the stuff that you're talking to us. Is there a place to access these resources? Not your PowerPoint, but once we're finished with this so that I can talk about it, that I can research it, that I can share with clients. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
So where can you find this stuff? We don't have one map that shows it all. We do have project landing pages on the School of Energy Resources website that you can find some of this information. I would also direct you to the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute that just put together a really neat, they call it the CCUS story map for Wyoming. And you can find a lot of this information on that website.
Will you say that again, please, Scott, and maybe put it in the chat? Appreciate it.
Sure. It's from the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, but I will Google it and put it in the chat.
I'm putting it into the chat right now. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. So with that, let me just make sure that this is available for everyone. I will share my screen now. And what Selena and I wanted to present to you is we've talked about the policy piece with KIP. We've talked about the technological ways we can make it happen with Scott. And Selena and I have been exploring how do Wyoming residents think about Wyoming's future energy economy. And I just wanted to show you some of the results that we got from that study. Okay. So Selena and I conducted this study 2019, 2020. We are going to replicate it in 2022 because there is so much going on in Wyoming and globally, arguably, regarding all things energy, all things climate change. And certainly there's a huge discourse going on in Wyoming that is evolving. And we would like to see what the trends are in terms of how what people's beliefs and attitudes and perceptions are regarding all this discourse. So these are the results from a year ago. And we did it in the framework of social license. Social license is a society's or a local community's acceptance or approval of a company's activities or operations. Usually it's voluntary, it's often informal, and it's granted by a community based on the opinions and views of stakeholders. And in this case, community means the community of Wyoming. An understanding of social license that exists for different types of energy may support, this was our hope, the important and complex decision-making that is necessary right now in Wyoming. So this was our motivation, if you will. So what did this study look like? The purpose was to explore the values, beliefs, and perceptions of residents in Wyoming regarding its energy economy writ large, and provide an understanding of what people in Wyoming prefer and envisage for the future. We did it in two phases. One was a random sample survey. So it was a survey that went all over Wyoming. And I think it went to 1,200 households. And we followed that up with interviews with people who are very involved in the energy economy to say, okay, this is what we all think here in Wyoming. This is what our respondents are saying. Now, if you go and talk to people who are heavily involved in it on a day-to-day basis, what are they saying? And three themes came out of that, which I will share with you in a minute. So the first phase, the survey, to explore Wyoming residents' values and beliefs related to energy. As I said, it was done in 1920, and then after 2019, 2020, and then it was a random distribution of survey data that was matching the population by county in the state. We received 522 responses, which means that we can extrapolate these results to the state with a plus or minus 4% confidence interval. So regarding the values, this is what we heard from our respondents. The very top one was aesthetic value. And I had a question yesterday, which I get actually quite frequently, is what the heck do you mean by aesthetic value? Each of these values was defined in the survey, so there's a common understanding of what we mean by aesthetic value. And by aesthetic value, we mean how important is Wyoming in terms of your senses, in terms of your visual appreciation, in terms of smells, in terms of taste, in terms of hearing. When you perceive the landscape of Wyoming, how important is that to you? That's aesthetic value, and that ranked highest. The next highest one was biological diversity. Third one was recreation value. Fourth one was economic value, and fifth one was community value. Now, the economic value, if you go further into the data and analyze it further, there's a very high correlation between economic value and recreation value, but also economic value and, for example, cultural values and subsistence values. Wyoming is, I have discovered in my career, is akin to Alaska in the sense that people in Wyoming have a very visceral relationship to the state. We are dependent, or very many of us are dependent on having elk meat in the freezer for the winter. We rely on it. We pride ourselves on it. We wouldn't want to do without the experience. Heck, it's the reason why we live here. So there are all these relationships between these values that amount to this highest ranking value of aesthetic value. Then we asked them what their support and opposition was in relation to different types of energy production. Natural gas had the highest amount of support, followed by oil, solar, wind, coal, and nuclear. And what I would like to, the thing that's interesting to me is this very large amount of people, 1/3 of our respondents, who actually were saying, you know, I'm not sure about nuclear. And that's interesting because we actually have an active conversation going on in this state about nuclear energy. There's a good chance that we're going to get a nuclear energy plant, a modular one here in Wyoming, which for many of us is very exciting, for many of us is very concerning, but for most of us seems to be a question mark. So that means there's a conversation to be had. Wyoming, respondents in Wyoming want to have the conversation about nuclear energy. And the same thing goes for other aspects related to energy production. So minerals, rare earths, as Scott was talking about, rare earth elements. So in terms of energy storage, again, big conversation to be had. Same for uranium, same for carbon sequestration, same for rare earth elements, and then there were a lot of things that people couldn't even think of, but generally they want to have the conversation. So there's a lot of opportunities that we're looking at in this state that people in this state don't know about, don't understand, would love to know more about. I think that's encouraging. And then to find out what people's attitudes were towards the amount of fossil fuel development in our state, 58% said it should be increased, 16% said maintain the current amount, 18% said it should be reduced, and then there was a minority that did not know, weren't sure. When we looked at renewable development, their attitudes were that it should be increased by 70%, so that's significantly more. Maintain current amount, should be reduced, 9%, not sure, 8%. And this not sure for both of them was about the same. Bottom line, when people say, I'm not sure, it means I need more information and I don't understand the trade-offs. I don't know what the trade-offs are. That's what the conversation could be about in this state. Then we asked them specifically about CCS and CCUS, and the results there showed that, oops, that was a little too far. It's important to keep Wyoming fossil fuels competitive in the marketplace. 38% said yes, not sure, again, was the second highest level of respondents, 32%. It should be widely adopted to reduce carbon emissions, 30%. About 13% says it's a way to perpetual fossil fuel production rather than encouraging renewable energy production. It could have harmful side effects, was the belief of about 11%. It's too expensive, and Wyoming shouldn't invest in them, about 6%. And it's not important for Wyoming, was 3%. So there too, a conversation to be had, but there is an increasing, or at least there is a relatively high amount of people who feel like it needs to be looked at to keep Wyoming competitive. Okay, and then the second phase of our study was to look at this Q study, which was an interview with around 25 people, 24 people, and they were professionally involved in industry, government, agriculture, conservation, university, recreation, and utility. So it was a statement sorting exercise. So however they put those statements, there were 36 statements. And if you put a statement that you really agree with in that strongly agree square number 5, then it's allocated a value of number 5. This numerical allocation of a value to where people place these statements put together a discourse of what these people are thinking regarding Wyoming's energy future. And it gave us both quantitative data in terms of where do people land in terms of factor analysis, but it also gave us a lot of information about why people were saying what they're saying. So that created, what emerged out of that were 3 themes. The first one is the renewables theme. And I'll go into an explanation of what those themes are in a little bit. The second one had a heavy emphasis on economics, and the third one had a heavy emphasis on quality of life. So the renewable theme, in this theme, the people who had the most amount of support for renewable energy, they loaded on this factor or this theme. They were very interested in renewable or in economic diversification with a real interest in information-based industries. And these respondents were especially interested or motivated by concerns for climate change and other environmental topics. So this renewable theme was really coming at it from a conservation environmental angle, and it wasn't just people from conservation groups who loaded on this theme. It was all kinds of people. It was very interesting. And one thing that I want to tell you that we found, this came up yesterday in the Sheridan workshop, is the belief that people in Wyoming are resistant to the conversation about climate change. They think climate change is a hoax. The survey of the 522 participants that we had only one, and we got thousands of comments from those 522 individuals. We only had one person say climate change is a hoax. We put that as a statement in this exercise. In all 3 themes, all these people said strongly disagree. They do not think climate change is a hoax. And the reason why is they said it's immaterial whether you think it's a hoax or not. Wyoming is dependent on other states for our markets, and they think climate change is absolutely real and are so serious that they've got heavy-duty policies behind them. So how are we going to meet that type of demand? So whether it's a hoax or not just wasn't that important. And besides, to all our respondents said, no, it's a thing. To one extent or another, however you define things, it's a thing. So I thought that was an interesting finding that we got. Then there's the theme where economics was the heavy emphasis. And the people who loaded on this theme were predominantly really interested in the economic future of Wyoming and were very involved in economic strategies or were leaders of businesses, things like that. So that was what their motivation. They really support carbon capture and storage to enhance mineral recovery, but also for the sake of carbon sequestration. And they are absolutely open to new uses of technology. In this theme and the previous theme, what we also found was a real impatience to get going with new technologies, to meet these new changing markets, and to be more proactive and inclusive. As one respondent said, Wyoming tends to be a little bit, what was the word that they said? Introvert. And they felt Wyoming needs to be a bit more extrovert, more inclusive, more outgoing, more open to new ideas. And that really came out in this theme. And then the last theme was the quality of life theme. And here the emphasis was really on the importance of, okay, we're going through transitions. We need to talk about our future energy economy. But what does that mean in terms of jobs? What does it mean in terms of job security, retraining possibilities, making sure that our children have jobs in the future here in Wyoming? How do we keep our kids home? What about health insurance? Are people going to have health insurance? So different emphasis, and then strong considerations for reliable and cost-effective energy delivery to Wyoming people. So the takeaways from this entire study from both phases was there is social license for a comprehensive energy strategy for Wyoming. There is social license for it to create and activate an energy strategy that takes the economy, environment, these three big aspects that people brought up, and quality of life into consideration. And I do believe that that strategy is in the works right now. Scott and Kip, correct me if I'm wrong. Another finding was we need to talk in this state. We need to communicate more. We need to have more workshops like this. There is a desire to learn more about technologies that appear promising to many, like CCUS and newer nuclear energy developments. People would love to learn more. We learned about, one takeaway was about Wyoming values, and basically what those values indicate, the ranking of those values to us meant that Wyoming residents' sense of place is very strong. And it's tied to aesthetics, biological diversity, economy, and community. For all, and the other values basically amounted up to the reasons why they're so interested in aesthetics, biological diversity, community, and economy. And finally, the other big takeaway was change is going to come. Generally, energy production related to gas, oil, renewables, and coal are largely supported by the public, with the understanding that the current energy portfolio will change and Wyoming needs to prepare. People are saying what we heard loud and clear, both in the survey and in the Q study, is yes, it's going to change. It's okay, we're ready for change, but for Pete's sakes, get ahead of it so that we're prepared for it. You know, again, be proactive, be inclusive. That's all I have for our results. Selena, did you want to add anything? Selena was my co-researcher on this.
No, I don't have anything to add, Jess. I do see that Jim Ford posted a question here. He was wondering about the over 500 responses and more information about where they were distributed in Wyoming, which I think we had that information in the report.
We do.
Yeah,
Jim, that's a great question. And a lot of people were asking that question. Bottom line, what we found is that the responses we received from our 22 Wyoming counties was proportional to the amount of people who live in all our counties. So it wasn't as if there was a much higher response rate from Campbell County, for example. It was a really even spread across the state. But I think a lot of us are interested in knowing how especially energy dependent counties would respond to these questions, how that would come out. And that's why Selena and I, for this IWEST project, we are going to be sending out a survey, hopefully later this month, probably in October, to ask some questions that we're discussing in this workshop. But in a way, we're going to really focus on energy dependent counties to find out what their thinking is regarding going net neutral. So I hope that helps. If you have any other questions, I'd love to hear them. Any other questions regarding our survey? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So that means we are at 10 minutes past 11. I think it's time that everyone takes a break. So why don't we take a 15-minute break and we will get back together at 3:25. Thanks very much.
What encourages me about Wyoming is if there is the political will, there's still the opportunity to make investment and to do technology focused. And even before the governor announced it, I was advocating with some of the other people that I thought we should go with a net carbon or a carbon neutral or greater approach, because I think that there is a nice story to tell when you tell the story that Wyoming has exported more BTUs of than anyone else in the world and contributed a lot of CO2 emissions, to then saying that Wyoming's going to lead the world in development of technologies that are carbon neutral or greater.
Cool. Okay. Thanks so much, Mark. It's great to hear. Erin Phillips.
Good afternoon. I am a geologist at the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources, and I work on our rare earth elements and critical mineral projects, as well as a number of our other projects, including carbon capture and storage. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Erin. Phil Christopherson.
Hi, it's good to be here. And I apologize because I just joined in. I'm on the Wyoming Economic Development Association board, and we had a board meeting starting at 2, so I'm a little bit late to the game. But I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Energy Capital Economic Development. We're very involved with transforming and transitioning our economy here. I know my Vice President Curtis Burdett has been on the call all along, so I'm going to sit and listen and let Curtis provide any relevant answers so that I don't look like a fool here.
No, don't be too quiet, Phil, please. Okay, well, Curtis, let's go to you then.
All right, as Phil mentioned, I work here at Energy Capital Economic Development. So yeah, just very involved in the different projects that we have going on, and looking forward to all the efforts to think about what the way forward looks like.
Great, thank you. Heidi.
Hi, I'm the Executive Director of Gillette College Foundation here in Gillette. And so I'm very interested to hear all the goings on in the state. I've also been involved in a committee that we've been meeting, about almost a year now, Communities of Excellence, looking at ways of how we can get Campbell County to be working together and getting us moving forward in the direction that our current economy and the future is going to take us. So very excited to hear about all of these projects.
Great, thank you so much for joining. Let's see, Matt, good to see you.
Thanks so much.
My colleague from the university.
Thanks, Jess. Matt Henry. I am an assistant professor in the Honors College at the University of Wyoming and an affiliate of the School of Energy Resources, and had been with the Hobbs School for 2 years before just recently changing roles. And I do not have a technical background. I have a humanities, social sciences, and policy background focused on energy transitions and community resilience, and have been involved in a couple of different efforts focused on energy transitions and community values in the state, including engaging youth right now on a statewide writing and narrative contest about what they hope the future of Wyoming looks like in the year 2030, which we just launched last week. So you may hear about that. I'm really happy to be here to learn from everyone today.
Fantastic, Matt. Yeah, I just want to point out, Matt and other folks at the Haupt School of Natural Resources and other departments at the University of Wyoming, we're all working on this subject of the future energy economy, and everyone is trying to make a contribution to make it happen in a way that's as productive and painless as possible. It's actually very exciting to have all these wonderful colleagues working on this. So thanks, Matt. Janelle Oberlander, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jessica. I'm Janelle Oberlander. I'm the president of Gillette College. And as many of you probably know, Gillette just became the Gillette Community College District, the first new community college district in the state of Wyoming since 1968. So we're very pleased and we're very excited about that. And we are at a prime place for us to continue working in this Carbon Valley concept and Carbon Valley space. And we have certainly enjoyed at Gillette College getting to know our friends down at the University of Wyoming School of Energy and Resource. Certainly we work closely with our local elected officials as well and our local partners from economic development and the Chamber of Commerce. As Heidi mentioned, we are certainly the anchor institution for our Carbon Valley efforts, along with Dr. Gilbert. And so we are just really excited about the possibilities and certainly what Gillette College can do now and in the future as we go forward with this exciting time in our economic transition in the state of Wyoming.
Thanks so much, Janelle. Yeah, very exciting. Greg Scott.
I should add that Gillette is my hometown. So.
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, I'm Greg Shores. I'm a Gillette City Council person. Been here in Gillette for about 23 years. And my interest lies more in the economic development side of things, leading the city into the future. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. Ryan Llewellyn. Sorry, Ryan, I can't hear you, and I'd love to hear you. You know what, if you want to, sorry, Ryan, do you want to put it in the chat box and introduce yourself? Tell us who you're with. Thank you. Rusty is on a conference call at the same time. Rusty Bell is County Commissioner for Campbell County. So he's just introduced himself in the chat room. I just wanted to make sure, are there any other folks from Wyoming who would like to introduce themselves? Okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much. I am now going to go into the questions. So first of all, I wanted to give you guys a definition of, in this context, when we're talking about carbon neutrality, what exactly do we mean? And here is the definition. Carbon neutrality refers to having net zero carbon dioxide emissions. This can be achieved by balancing the amount of carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere with the amount that is removed. Or it can be achieved by eliminating emissions altogether. The IWEST project is specifically focused on carbon neutrality in the energy systems in the Intermountain West. So that's what we mean. First question, given that understanding of carbon neutrality, do you feel that it is desirable to have a carbon neutral Wyoming, or for your community to be carbon neutral? What are your thoughts? Is it desirable? Any thoughts? Mark, I'm going to pick on you if you don't mind.
Hey, so I guess I'm going to put a caveat on this. Like, I think that a net zero world, in a perfect world, that's probably not what anybody in Wyoming would want. I don't think that's probably what Campbell County would want either. But I think that there's a major opportunity there if it's done correctly to take advantage of opportunities for deploying technology. And for Wyoming, as opposed, there's been a discussion for a long time that Wyoming in many ways is kind of like a colony where, you know, I mean, everybody just came and then they take these raw resource and then they ship it back to Europe and refine it with all of their employment and labor there. We've kind of been that for a century plus just with energy. I think this is our opportunity and it's being forced upon us, but this transition, if it's managed correctly, provides a lot of opportunities to Wyoming if Wyoming will step through them. But somebody's going to have some real leadership and take some political risk. And so far, nobody wants to do that. Because somebody's going to have to commit some money and not every one of them is going to be successful. So you have to go into it knowing that you may have some wins and some losses.
Okay.
I know I dodged your, but I think that that's what.
So let me just make sure that I heard it correctly. And by the way, everyone, Selena is world's greatest note taker, as well as economist. And she's kindly helping out with the note taking. So Selena, if you have any other questions, please chime in. But Mark, so what you're saying is, what I didn't quite understand is why were you saying it's not preferable? It's not.
And everybody in Wyoming, if they had their way,
yeah,
would continue the idyllic situation where the mineral industry pays for everything. And like that gravy train would just continue. And I love this too, because like I live here and it's like, how many places in the country can your kid go to college for free? Can you have all these other things and have it paid for? You know what I mean? Like in a perfect world, that production gravy train would have just continued where you had budget surplus year after year after year. But the world is a changing world. And unfortunately, this was super clear back in 2008 and that things were headed this carbon neutral direction. And it was, those who missed it in 2008, like it was ridiculously clear by 2014. And we still continue to fail to address it. And I think that what I liked about your data, at least, I think it's a small sample size, but I think that the data you had shows from the people more willingness to address some of these things than you're seeing politically. Now, I'd be interested to see how that extrapolates to a larger population base. But I think initially, I find that somewhat encouraging because I'm always very pessimistic on what I consider to be the average person's belief here.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Michelle, I see you nodding your head. What are you agreeing with?
Super surprised at the results of your survey because in my experience as a Wyoming citizen, if you're talking regarding changes and new opportunities, research development and stuff, unless you're open-minded in regard to that, there's a lot of opposition, in my opinion, like pushback regarding adopting some of the best practices across the nation and how are we going forth regarding leadership, regarding funding, regarding all of these different things. There's a huge discrepancy. You hear it, you hear people talking about things within our community, how we're going to move forth, but yet we still have this attitude of, well, we're going to dig in our heels and we're going to I don't know, fight this on some level. And it's really difficult to like the everyday common persons, the lay person, not people who are working in I don't know. It just seems like people are uninformed, uneducated. Myself am uneducated as to all of the possibilities for us moving forth and what some of the things that are going on in my own community I'm not super aware of. And I've been here a long time, and I am an information seeker. And so we're in silos on lots of levels regarding our information, our communication regarding that. People who are already in these industries, they talk like it's it's all this jargon stuff, which is fine, we know this, but it's not helping our common average citizen to be informed regarding our future, the opportunities, and how we can plug into that with strategies, practical strategies that are realistic, that are today's world, and not all these pie in the sky, big, great ideas. What is a common man? I mean, we need to educate our citizens regarding what's going on, in my opinion. That's just from a layperson's opinion. And I love Mark's articulation regarding this, policy. There's a lot of things that need to be happening. But educating our citizens regarding our situation. I mean, they know we're in a dire straits, but yet we're sitting here swimming. We're not even swimming. We have a cement block on our, some people do, but not everybody. And so we need to get everybody educated as to what is going on and how we can move forth in a way that's on a grassroots level, not just politician stuff, but everyday worker bees like me.
Yeah. So Michelle, just a quick follow-up. So as a way, do you think that carbon neutrality, embracing carbon neutrality, is a way of moving forward for Wyoming? Do you think it's a desirable way of moving forward?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's just how and what strategies and what systems, policies, and programs are in place to do that. Not all this talk and hot air about this and that. I mean, it's like, let's get a plan and let's move. I mean, these plans are all over the place. We're shooting bullets practically in our foot.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Mark, you have your hand up.
I wanted to say one thing. I think that when you asked about it, I think it's an opportunity for Wyoming because the fossil fuel future is already decided by the markets. And so I think that there's also, though, a runway and some time to get that done. But if you look at where things are going, the neutrality is the way they're going. If you want to have future jobs for people, you do that. But what I would add to that is the biggest problem I see right now is politics. So regardless of what everybody's political beliefs are, there is an opportunity for Wyoming to leverage money for carbon negative, a carbon neutral economy with DOE and with all of the funding that has come out of the current administration. And those are opportunities. And my thought has always been, I always have administrations I'd prefer one over the other, but that doesn't mean you can't work with every one of them. And I think Wyoming is missing the opportunity because there is very little overarching organization between all of the communities and the larger groups. And I don't think that we are well prepared to take advantage of just this 300 million that's available now. That is the kind of money that could make real fundamental impacts on diversifying the economies in some of these communities. But everybody's going to have to get over their political fury, maybe, in order to look at that opportunity and fully embrace it. And it's not that everybody, most people realize where things are going, but they carry all of this baggage that is preventing us from going forward. And when there is any sort of talk about coal impacted communities and who should be lobbying for that and doing it, we should be at the top of the list. And we're not.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. I'm going to ask, Heidi, please.
I was just going to mention, and Mark probably isn't aware of this, but one of the things when Michelle was talking earlier about how we have all these plans in place, but there's nobody coordinating anything. So one of the things that we're actually working on right now is an EDA grant as part of that ARPA grant funding for coal impacted communities. And what we're going to be requesting is somebody to basically establish an office of transformation here in Campbell County, and then another person to assist them. And then they're going to take a look at all of these wonderful studies that we've done here in Campbell County and try to bring all of this together. So we are definitely aware of those EDA opportunities. And I think there are some other opportunities that are being sought by other entities here in Campbell County as far as that coal impacted communities funding. So it is a great opportunity and we do need to take advantage of that. So I agree with what Mark said 100%.
Okay, wow, that's exciting to hear, Heidi. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, and everyone keep sharing that information. This is supposed to be a community conversation, so let us know. Okay, I'm going to pick on someone else for a little bit. Phil, if you don't mind, what are your thoughts regarding the desirability of carbon neutrality for Wyoming?
Well, first of all, you ask if I don't mind. I never mind. I got pretty independent minded. Carbon neutrality is what we have to do. And I want to reflect on what Mark had to say. There are people in the state, and I'm one of them, who don't really necessarily believe in climate change. I don't think it is a negative thing, but the reality is our market believes it. If we're going to have a prosperous future, we need to understand their beliefs, we need to understand their fears, and we need to provide a product that they want to buy that is carbon neutral. And so I know with the Integrated Test Center program that Governor Meade did in partnership with private industry was meant to reflect and address those concerns. And if we ignore those concerns, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot. I like the analogy that, and I used to own a donut shop, so I use donuts as an analogy. If nobody in the world wanted to buy donuts anymore, then you need to come up with a new product that people do want to buy. And with our coal industry, people don't want to buy coal, so we need to develop new products and new things that the world does want to buy. That's why we're going after rare earth elements. That's a very critical thing that people want to buy. If we can find ways to extract those from coal, from fly ash, from other things, then we need to do that. People do want carbon fiber. If we can find a way to manufacture that using coal as the raw material, then that's what we should do. We need to develop new products that people do want that have carbon at their heart. And so in that sense, I think that we need to respond to the market demands and the market desires.
Thank you so much, Phil. I'm going to ask one more. Yeah, Scott?
Yes, I was just wondering if Phil could, since we have so many IWEST participants and DOE participants, if you could just give the 30-second philosophy behind the Wyoming Innovation Center and what you're building there.
Absolutely. The Wyoming Innovation Center is intended to be a facility where that lab level work has been done. I mean, in a lab, you can convert coal into virtually anything, but it's never been scaled up to prove that it's commercially viable. So the Wyoming Innovation Center is a facility where that technology can be scaled up and prove whether it's commercializable or not. If somebody can commercialize it and make money at it, then they'll take it to the next step and build a commercial facility. Well, now they will convert coal to carbon fiber, activated carbon, asphalt, and thousands of other products and actually make money at it. That makes coal a viable feedstock for that coal refinery where things like that can be done. So that's what our Wyoming Innovation Center does. It provides a location, space for that scaled up technology.
That's great to hear, Phil. Thanks for asking that question, Scott. Very exciting. Okay, let me ask one more person on this question and then we'll move to the next question unless someone else wants to chime in. Greg, could you give me your thoughts on this question of carbon neutrality? Do you think it's desirable for Gillette, for Wyoming?
I have to talk kind of out of two sides of my mouth. Personally, I'm like a couple of the other folks on here, no. And that's my personal side. I don't think there's enough statistical evidence, and I don't think there's enough scientific evidence to support the drivers that we hear being behind looking at carbon neutrality.
Okay.
Now, I'm the other side of my person here is being the city council person. That we have to look at this as an opportunity to diversify our economy. And as Phil pointed out, we need to find the products that the folks who are on board with the climate change issue, they appear to be those who we need to sell to at this point. And so we need to develop those products. And hopefully some of them can be made out of the raw materials that we have here.
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much, Greg, for sharing that. I'm sure that there's a lot of people in Wyoming who feel the same way as you do. And it's a tough balance. I'll go unless anybody, yeah, Phil, go for it.
Now, just because we don't really fully support climate change doesn't mean we do not believe in a good environment. Having a clean environment is incredibly important to us. Wyoming is an outdoor state. And so we believe in a good, clean environment. We believe in having products that are environmentally sound, environmentally safe. You're not going to talk to really anybody in Wyoming who does not believe that the environment is incredibly important.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, Phil. That really came out in Selena and my study, how important that is. That was number one. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, I'll go to the next question, which is, what carbon neutral technologies would you be excited about for Gillette and or Wyoming? And if you think of the ideas that Scott came up with, there may be others. But are there any carbon neutral technologies that you'd be interested in or like to know more about? Danelle?
Certainly from my perspective at the colleges, we want to know about all of them, right? Because we need to know what we need to be preparing our workforce for. What do we need to change? What curriculum do we need to change? What new programs do we need to bring on? What does that involve? What partnerships does that involve? So I think from a perspective at Gillette College, we're open and excited to hear all about all the possibilities. But what's realistic for our community? What's realistic for the resources we have here? What's realistic for our workforce? You're changing several decades of the mindset of coal miners. My dad was a coal miner. I have a mindset of a coal miner's daughter, right? So we need to begin to change and transform that mindset for our community and for the young people coming up down the road and show them what the possibilities are. So we're interested in all of them.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. Interesting. Great to hear. Yeah. And you're right. Thank you for bringing up the psychological component to all of this. It's a very big point. Heidi.
I was just going to say that I think that hydrogen mining sounds very interesting because if I remember correctly, you actually extract that from the coal seams, like the top seam and the bottom seam or something like that. And I'm thinking that would be a really good fit for our miners up here because they basically be doing what they're doing right now. And so I would be really excited to learn more about that. But I agree with Janelle. We want to know about all of it to see what we need to do here at the college to get our workforce ready for these changes.
Right, exactly. Michelle.
And then get people educated as to what they are and the benefits of them, the pros and the cons, because that's what we lack a lot of times before we do these things is educating the general citizens. I know about this stuff, but what about my friends? What about people who are working in these things, who are just grinding every day doing their stuff? They just want to get a meal made and their exercise in and their kids fed. but we need to do a public community-wide campaign of education regarding it so that we have some good quality decisions being made versus the polarization.
Okay. Thank you. This is such great input, everyone. Thank you. Curtis, I wanted to find out what your thoughts are. I've seen you nodding your head as well.
You know, I just came into economic development at the beginning of last year into a full-time role. So it's really been exciting working with Scott and the team at SER with some of the projects that they're looking at with the higher education folks. I mean, some of the opportunities with the Innovation Center, the Integrated Test Center, you know, really make this a playground for new things that can be done with carbon as a feedstock and making some of those things happen and really addressing that excitement for the change that's necessary with, you know, some of that cultural, psychological, you know, my parents did this and this worked for them in this community and it's worked for our taxpayers with the structures and everything. So there's some big challenges that come out of that. And so there has to be an excitement with it. So being at the forefront of something with this Carbon Valley effort really sets some things in motion that make it an exciting place to be and ahead of other communities that haven't had that focus.
Right. Okay, great. Rusty, are you still on your phone call? I'm going to keep trying to bring in the county commissioner into this conversation because I'd like to hear his thoughts, but he may still be on his call. Mark, what are your thoughts? What kind of technologies were interesting to you?
Hey, Jessica, give me 30 seconds. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm doing the same thing as Rusty.
All right. Communication in the time of COVID. Greg, how about you? Let me put you on the spot again.
My thing is rare earth elements.
Okay.
That has a big current and future prospects. And right now, domestically, we don't produce very much, if any of that. And it would give an opportunity to bring that kind of production back into the country.
Yes. Yes, I think that a lot of people would agree with you on that. Thank you. Matt, how about you? Are you hearing anything? I know that you're doing a lot of research on all these related topics. Are you hearing anything about how people are feeling about carbon neutrality or technologies that they're curious about?
The thing that I've been doing a lot lately is talking with students because I teach a lot. And I think that based on my interactions with young people here, there's quite a bit of openness to learning about all of the above, but really looking for opportunities to stay in Wyoming. And I think that's a big one. And if there are opportunities in emergent areas for them to feel excited about the future, I think that's, you know, I think I hate to speak on behalf of the youth, but that's what I'm hearing a lot of. I taught a couple of classes last year in which we talked about these issues in Wyoming, and a lot of my students were from the state. And so that's what I'm hearing from my experience with students at the university, is a sort of all of the above. We love Wyoming and want to stay here and want to help it thrive. And so we're open.
That is great to hear, Matt. And that's a really good point because Selena and I heard that in the Q study and the survey as well. And not just from young people, but also parents who wanted their kids to be able to stay in Wyoming and see the grandkids more. But also from younger people who wanted to come to Wyoming and stay in Wyoming, and they were excited about, you know, if Wyoming really got to grips with these new technologies, they wanted to be part of it because they also saw it as a part of helping Wyoming forward and being part of that excitement. So thank you for bringing that up because that was an important point of our work as well. Okay, Erin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to second Greg's sentiments on my excitement for rare earth elements and critical minerals, especially in the Powder River Basin. We have a new project coming up looking at all parts of the rare earth element and critical mineral supply chain in the Powder River Basin. So I'm really happy to see a number of our project partners on this call, and we're looking forward to working together with many of you. And I just wanted to let the rest of you know to please contact me with further questions about that project. And I also just wanted to say thanks for all of the comments about communication and community outreach, because that's a big part of this project. And, you know, it's really something that we're striving for, to put together workforce development programs. And so that's really the direction that we're going with a lot of this. So we look forward to working with you. And Heidi, I also would love to talk with you more about the Office of Transformation. I think that really fits in with our goals on rare earth elements and critical minerals.
Cool. Okay, great, Erin. Thank you so much. I love how there's all these connections being made. It's very helpful. Okay, I am now going to go to the next question, which is, excuse me, I'm drinking a seltzer. When you think about your community over the next 20 to 50 years, what types of energy would you support having in or near your community? Mark.
I'm back. I was on 2 calls. Like I said, we're all juggling all this stuff in this world. The one thing I was going to tell you on the technologies, and then I'll address this question, is Wyoming should be focused on all of the above.
Okay.
So I find it really short-sighted when the legislature takes like anti-wind stance. Now, I believe that I think everybody should pay their fair share. I don't have any issue with taxing all production types. But I think that that's really short-sighted. And I think that like if we're going to advocate and we're going to claim to be a forward-thinking community, we should be all of the above. And if I want the country to be all of the above, Wyoming should be all of the above too. And so that means that we should look at the technologies we should focus on, in my mind, are things that do continue to have like my goal set, and Jim and I talked about this before, like our goals are like reliability, something that's cost effective. Like people in the US, people in Wyoming, and you were like, when we flip the switch, we want to have power. Like we don't really care. Like I don't want to be in the middle of sub-Saharan Africa where the generator might quit in the middle of my surgery. Like when I flip the power, like that's what I expect. And I think that we need to focus on those. And I think that sometimes with renewables, we're shutting down fossil fuels that have provided reliability before we have in place grid scale storage. And I think that like we're shortening that runway by condensing all the rest of this stuff, not having fully figured out when we're going to have grid scale storage. So with that said, we should be pursuing CCUS. I think that we could advocate for it better. I think that it's forward thinking of us to work with power on the nuclear. Wyoming's also one of the biggest. I think that we should have wind and solar. I think that there is an opportunity if you utilize some of these technologies to create a situation where either through storage or through complementing some of these renewables, you can complement the renewable and then still pair it with CCUS and some of these other things. And that would traditionally look, if I were a power producer, that might not look cost effective, except for I live in this world now where DOE is all of this grant, all of this incentive to pursue these things. And so my goal for Wyoming is that Wyoming is the place where we're scaling up grid scale technology you come to. And I don't care if that is done because we partner well with DOE and because we have our own funding sources, or if that's because we offer the best and brightest workforce, or because we have taken and retooled at this new community college people to go from coal-based existing jobs to work in these more advanced fields. But like when I was a commissioner, this is what always kept me awake at night, was I had the majority of my community, the majority of the wages paid here, the wages that are those basic level wages that multiply into everybody else's, the people who are making $80,000 a year driving the haul truck. Like when you try to put those people into a new work, like what is their skill? Right now, their skill has been, they've been making 80 to 120,000 a year, and their skill is being willing to work really crappy hours because you work 12-hour shifts. So like, we do have real strengths when it comes to our machining and our welding and our other things, which can complement these other industries really well when you're looking at all of the infrastructure to capture a bunch of CO2 and store it in the ground. They can do these other things, but like Wyoming needs a unified message. They also need one consistent clearinghouse to help push that through. I think that we need to eat a little bit of crow and go work with the current administration to say, like, we want to take full advantage of our share of the 300 million. And we want to deploy this here and now. And we already have the legal framework to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that the sooner we do that, the better. I'm with me personally. I would love a utopian world where everything was green and everything had no alternate impact. But like, you don't live in this perfect world. And so like the fossil fuel piece is an important component. But like, if you also look, everybody else in the world wants a reliable grid like they have in the US. So like, I think we should be focusing on the technologies that allow for the reliability in the grid. And some of that is CCUS and some of that is modular nuclear, and it's any number of, there's no reason we couldn't focus on storage technologies here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. You've done a lot of thinking on this. It's great to hear. Okay, I think, are there any other responses to this question? I haven't heard much yet. When you think about your community over the next 20 to 50 years, what types of energy would you support having in or near your community? So
Yes.
we go ahead, Scott.
Can I answer from a research perspective?
Absolutely.
So from my little perch here in Laramie and peering over into Campbell County, one thing that this community does really well is invite the testing of energy technologies. I think you can see that in the Integrated Test Center. You can see it in Phil, the economic development groups in the Wyoming Innovation Center and others. So I think for me, and of course I realize I'm 300 miles away, I think there is a real opportunity for Gillette and the surrounding communities to help test these new technologies and help bring them to the state. So when you ask the questions of what energy technologies do you want to see, I want to see some novel ones there. I think that's something that this community does really well.
Thanks, Scott. Go ahead, Phil.
To answer your question, I'd welcome any type of energy technology. The one thing that really sets the United States apart and makes us such a very livable country is that we have affordable, abundant energy. You don't have to wonder at night if when you turn the lights on, they're going to come on or not. When you turn the air conditioning on, it's going to cool. When you need heat, it's going to warm up your house. And we are very blessed as a nation because we have that affordable, abundant energy. I think moving forward, we need to explore all technologies that work: wind, solar, nuclear, new technologies that are out, storage technologies. And Campbell County, I think, supports that. We are known as the energy capital of the world. And I think we need to push that narrative and continue to support that, and be very welcoming of any technology that exists out there and new ones that may not even exist yet. In order to continue our leadership as a nation and really to elevate some of those other nations that certainly deserve to be elevated to higher levels, we need to develop new technologies, support the existing technologies, and help them grow, because the difference between the United States and some country that is underdeveloped is that we have good, reliable, abundant, affordable power. And so I would support any of those. By the way, I am on the Powering Up Wyoming Board of Directors, which is a lobbying group that is dedicated to supporting all of those energies and developing new wind, solar, and all of the above energy sources.
Fantastic. What was that? It's called Powering Up Wyoming?
Yes, Powering Up Wyoming.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so now I was just wondering, I don't think Rusty is on the call anymore, but we haven't heard from Michael. So Michael introduced himself in the chat room, and Michael, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but I'd love to hear from your perspective if you're still on the call.
Yes, I am. I am the director of a nonprofit in Campbell County. I am actually a woman, but I don't mind that you thought that I wasn't. My name is pronounced Michael. And I'm in my car driving to get my kids now, so if I sound distracted. Obviously, I'm not an expert in, energy resources, but our agency does kind of take the hit when coal takes a hit, when people can't find good, jobs. So really, I would just love to see our community make a plan and to take advantage of a lot of federal money that's coming down. And I don't really think that people need to be politically excited about those jobs. When somebody sees a good paying job, they're gonna take it regardless of their politics, if they've been unemployed. So I would say I just want to see us moving forward and trying something new so that we don't continue to lose good people from our community.
Thank you so much. Could you correct me, and how do you pronounce your first name, please?
You do pronounce it, Michael, so you got it.
Thank you so much. I think your perspective is because what you're working on is where the rubber hits the road in terms of personal experiences. So it's really good to hear from you, and thank you for joining the call. That's great.
Yeah, and I'll say,
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say my husband had a coal-related job that he was laid off from, and then tried to do another thing and was laid off in a big layoff again. So at least from personal experience too, I know that he would not care necessarily what it was. If it was he wouldn't care if it was to go work on wind or solar or anything like that. I think they're just looking for jobs that they can support their family.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. That's great to hear. Okay, I want to go to the next question. When you, and this is the last question, have you had past experiences that affect how supportive you would be to having new energy technologies in or near your community? What have these experiences been? I don't think Gillette has had any experiences. Michelle, you want to kick us off on that one?
Why don't you repeat the whole question again? I got lost on the first part. I got some of it.
Have you had, or has Gillette had, experiences that affect how supportive you would be to having new energy technologies in your area? If you have had experiences that affect how supportive you would be, what are those experiences? So I'll give you an example. Yesterday, when we were focusing on Sheridan, coal bed methane came up. And there's a lot of pros that came with coal bed methane, but there were also a lot of trade-offs related to it. So it was wonderful to have all that money for a while rolling around in Sheridan, and we all could go out to nice restaurants. But then all of a sudden it went away, and the restaurant went with it. There were environmental trade-offs that people were dealing with, and landowners had to deal with trade-offs in relation to coal bed methane. So those are the types of experiences that we're thinking of. Any experiences for Gillette?
I'll just chime in here. My family has a ranch south of Gillette, and so like we've negotiated with oil and gas and companies years. I think Wyoming has a good framework for protecting landowners. I disagree with some of the people in Sheridan. Like we ended up going to court one time. It was super expensive. It was not tons of fun, but like Wyoming's laws are good and protective of landowners. I think that when you look at all of that, those reasons that you just talked about in coal bed methane is the reason that they should do some of this. Because when coal bed methane went from $14 an MCF to, I don't know, gas is now at like $3 to $4 an MCF, depending on the time period. All those jobs went away because we were selling a product that was no longer marketable. And so all of those jobs in the restaurants and everybody went away because we have all of our eggs in one basket. If like what that should have taught us is we should be doing in all of the above. There's no reason we shouldn't be investing in all of these different things. And I think that Wyoming is proof. We've had our problems. I think sometimes things have moved quicker than we have in other ways. But I think by and large, if you look out across Wyoming, like it's still a beautiful place to live, and there's still a lot of energy developed. And like, wow, if that's the case, Phil, gas is way higher than it was for a while. But it still doesn't work for coal bed methane when you need at least 8. And I guess what I'm saying is, if we focused on those other things, a lot of the problems you talked about wouldn't be an issue. Wyoming is proof that you can have responsible energy development and beautiful open vistas.
If you drive, whoops,
Yep.
sorry.
Go
If you
for it.
drive in between Gillette and Douglas, I don't know about other people, but I've noticed so many beautiful windmills. I mean, for me, I think they're beautiful, and I don't know. And the state of Wyoming is gorgeous, but that to me gave me some encouragement that we are diversifying and that we are utilizing some of the things that are available out there just by seeing the windmills, the windmill farms, and in between Casper and Douglas. I mean, there's lots of different places. We're seeing evidence of it. It's just getting the infrastructure and the education, and then and generating all the economic development to do this stuff.
I think that what I was going to add to what Michelle said, I think that part of the problem, and like we look unattractive in a lot of times to renewable or new technology. And I think that based on the study data you have, that tells me is the public at large doesn't feel that way. But the message coming out of Wyoming is primarily driven by political sound bites from a couple of really loud people. Or like in Gillette, Wyoming, there's like some really loud people who just drive everything into the ground. And like, I think that if we as a whole did a better job of speaking on behalf of Wyoming, I think that would be good. Like, I think that when they announced the TerraPower thing, I think the state did a good job of taking a leadership position and advocating and speaking strongly. But we don't always do that for all of these other technologies. Everybody's always, the only people that really get heard in Wyoming are the political voices, and they're always running for re-election 6 months later. And so nobody has had any political courage to take on some of these transformative issues. And it's really easy to get reelected by saying, I'm going to fight for coal and put the coal miners back to work. The market economics of that, though, are fundamentally different. And when you guys were talking about the rest of stuff, like Michelle said this, like I like consume information, and like, unless you're actually out looking for it, it's really hard to find information on what is really happening in Wyoming related to energy or the economies of any of this. Like, the thing I thought was most encouraging was that your study data that the people realized, regardless of their issues with climate change, that the market was dictating it. I've been trying to get people to recognize that the market is dictating it for a long time. So like, maybe the fact that we have crossed that means if we can continue to speak, but we need to speak with one unified voice, that Wyoming is open for business. Wyoming is open to each and every type of energy. And the bickering in the legislature doesn't facilitate that, because that always goes to the top of some piece in Politico with what Wyoming's position is on alternate energy. Now, I find that when I was a commissioner, we were better received when we would go to some of these other places, because when we were back in meetings, we usually brought solutions. Like when we went to Interior, I didn't just go to Interior and be like, I don't like this rule. Like the people from Wyoming usually brought an alternative rule that was like, this is something that I think would allow you to meet your goals of conservation while still allowing to meet my goals of production and tax revenue and employment. Or maybe this bird stipulation, like I'm recognizing that we need to drill year round here for a little while because I don't want all of this traffic and dust, and I don't want my community to have high unemployment and then have a bunch of people laid off for 3 months. Yeah. Like, and usually when you found the right person, it wasn't always the first one, but when you eventually found the right person at like Interior, they recognize that too. And everybody can look at the long-term goal, then we could usually.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I think I'd like to ask this question from Greg. You've mentioned how long you've lived in Gillette. Are there any experiences that you've had that would make you be a little bit more reluctant to welcome new energy types, new energy technologies?
I'd have to answer no to that. I've lived in a lot of different environments before I came here. I'm a retired military officer, which is kind of a unique perspective on the energy industry. So yeah, when we went to the meeting on TerraPower coming in here, I'd like to make us the #1 choice. I'd welcome something like that.
Okay.
And anything else that folks might want to come up with for energy production.
Okay, great. So no experiences that make you reluctant?
No, I mean, I was around for 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and I understand because of my previous experiences in the military. I understand the technology in the TerraPower that they're proposing to bring in here, and it's a far safer form of nuclear power, and yeah, I'm behind that. If we could be the #1 choice, I would say bring it on. Yeah. We've got the place to put it. We've got the people to make it run.
Okay, that's great. Okay, how about you, Curtis? Any experiences that would make you reluctant to welcome new energy technologies?
Not at all. Really exciting to think about the things that are happening, but looking at, Dry Fork Station right here, we have a power station that has, taken what I've moved here from Michigan 5 years ago. We had a coal station from the 50s or 60s. Totally different environment to see right on Lake Michigan, and it's got piles of coal and coal ash and things, not like what you see here, where it's very thoughtful to think about what makes our community better while being able to produce power. So, looking at something that's, our newer coal station here to see what that's doing. But yeah, I was also at the discussion with TerraPower. I mean, just really, there's trade-offs in anything that we want if we want to be able to flip that light switch and have the lights come on, or have those different situations happen. So I think, I think in our community, I think one of the bigger hesitations is just that generational psychology of, we've been able to count on coal to provide for us, and if things are a little bit different, we might just have to stay ahead of that conversation to bring people with us and keep them excited about what's next and what's new.
Yeah, and again, that psychological component that really has to be taken into consideration. Thank you. Janelle, I hope you're still with us. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Since you're a coal miner's daughter.
Miner's daughter. I don't think I'm concerned about any new technology or, sources of what we've been talking about. I think it goes back to educating people about what those resources are and what that is all about, and how will that impact our community, and what are the positives, and are there any negatives. I think it comes back to a lot of that education. And sometimes it's hard to change that thought process, right? It's hard when you say nuclear energy, what do we all think of? And I think it's just a matter of more and more education. And I lived in Butte, Montana for several years. And if you're familiar with Butte, Montana, it was copper mining. And they used to use cyanide to leach the copper out and the gold. They didn't know any better at the turn of the century when they were doing that. We know better now. And we continue to learn new things about carbon and about the emissions that are happening. So we're starting to know better. And we want to make a cleaner environment for our future. As Matt said, that younger generation coming up is so much more open to this than that my generation is, my dad's generation. And so how can we keep educating and keep moving forward? I think that's going to be key.
Thank you. Yes, education is absolutely going to be key. Anybody else want to chime in on this subject of experiences that might make you reluctant about energy technologies, or just really enthusiastic about it, and what would it take to make it happen? Any other comments regarding this? Matt?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what I think Greg mentioned, 3 Mile Island, and Janelle talked about Butte, is that I don't have any personal experiences, but I think it's so important to get it right, and to make sure that, the clean environment priorities are there, the environmental justice priorities are there. So I think you'll lose people really quickly if new energy technologies are not implemented in a way that is thoughtful about communities and community health, public health, that sort of thing. So I'm glad that those issues are brought up.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, and Scott and Kip and Selena, correct me if I'm wrong, but environmental justice, justice and social justice, that's all very much part of the IWEST thinking, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's part of all thinking going forward that relates to energy. It's on the forefront of every company's mind.
It's great to hear. Yeah, Mark.
I think that when we've had issues like the coal bed methane one, when we had our own uranium mining issues in the past, part of what always happens in Wyoming is when there is some sort of trend or there is some sort of price that drives development, we're always too late to plan ahead. So like and I don't know if maybe this will come out of what UW is doing or not, but like one of the times Wyoming got it right was I don't know, it's probably a decade ago now, but it was Speaker Love now, was like, somebody needs to put in place a legal framework for regulating pore space in case at some point in the future you can do carbon capture and sequestration. Like that was really forward thinking, because all of that thought process was done before there was some economic case that meant that Gillette was going to go from 15,000 to 30,000 people in 4 years or something else. And I think that with some of these new technologies, there's an opportunity, at least legislatively or through rulemaking, to at least get ahead of it. Like it'd be nice if Wyoming had a statewide solar plan, so that like the developers knew what was expected, and then the people who are concerned for what the impact in their community is going to be can look at it, as opposed to us. Our usual way is somebody comes in and wants to do it, and then that first project is going while we're writing the rules. And so then we always have things that fall through the cracks. The biggest problem we had with coal bed methane was that we didn't get the bonding right. And like, I think that we should have learned our lesson from that at this point, and that we could be proactive on these other technologies. But there is an opportunity for Wyoming if Wyoming is forward thinking in the legislation and allowing for these technologies by allowing you as the developer to look at it and know what the rules are that you play by. And
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's something that like SCR could lead, but maybe that's part of this larger plan for energy, is like somebody, if we were ahead of the game on all of those other things, then those negatives, you're still going to have things that are going to go wrong, but at least you'd have a framework in place to manage them. You might be able to push back against some negative solar things, for example, with, we're not going to ruin the beautiful landscapes in Wyoming because this is what our plan looks like, and this is what is required of developers.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's what we heard in the survey. Again, very similar. You know, this popped up over and over again, is this proactive, big thinking, really get prepared. Exactly what you're saying, Mark. I wanted to see, is there anyone, Kip, did you want to say something? I see that your mute is off.
No, I'm just listening. This is just a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from you and Scott. Any thoughts so far, considering everything that everyone's contributed?
So I have a question related to the current question that's being discussed, if that's okay, and then I'll give it to you, Kip. So on experiences related to technologies, new technologies coming into the community, it's often, it happens often where somebody rolls into town and they have the new greatest best technology that's going to save coal, or it's going to save oil and gas, or it's going to do this new great thing. Has the Gillette community dealt with any of those issues and bad experiences? I know they come in every day, but are there any that come to mind?
I think there's been quite a few of those, and I think that Scott's point is valid. The only thing I could think of when we talked about this was there was an idea, it was called KFX 20 years ago, to turn coal briquettes in. Well, the problem is every time you remove the moisture from PRB coal, it spontaneously combusts. But that was pursued for years and years and years and years and years. And I think that with the bankruptcies at the mines, I think that was an issue. What was frustrating about that issue was when it came to the tax revenue, like a lot of the problems are foreseen. I was on the commission and we were saying, like, we need to get ahead of this because we have bankruptcies looming where we're going to have hundreds of millions of dollars at risk, because we had already seen it happen in oil every time the oil prices would tick down. And the reality was that it took 6 years to change something that should have been a very easy change. And it wasn't, the warnings were given, and it wasn't until a bunch of money was lost that the legislature finally acted. And so I think that we've had our share of those things. I think that's what makes more people nervous than anything. I like Governor Gordon when he was here for the Innovation Center, and he was like, he talked about some of the ones that we've seen here versus some of the others. And he's like, there's people who show up at the state all the time that are like, if you give us all of this government money, we are going to give you this great project. And I have seen some of those as commissioner. I think a lot of them were junk. But like there were some, and I got to credit Jim on this again, like there were some that like bootstrapped together a bunch of stuff and made it work. And, you know, I think that we have to get wiser too with how we evaluate. I think that's a good spot for UW as experts in technology to actually look at it and go, you guys are being sold a crop, or this is something that maybe is a good investment, or any number of other things, or what should drive those technology decisions.
So I'm assuming you're referring to Jim Hastings.
I'm Jim Ford. Jim Ford.
Jim Ford on the call?
Jim was there.
He said he was going to pop on and off today.
Okay.
Jim was actually with Atlas. And
So then my follow-up question to you, Mark, is I knew the answer. How can we invite those technologies in? How can we filter them, select them? How can we give them the red carpet, but not expose ourselves to bad ideas? I don't think as a state or as a community, we need to be sitting back and waiting for those technologies to come, but how do you sort of advertise that they're welcome, but have some sort of standard or filter to get through them?
Is there a vesting process that other states do somehow in industry? There's got to be some template. There's got to be some process, programs, vesting that goes on in other places.
I would say though, in this world, Michelle, that like in the energy scale up world, and Scott or Kip can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's a good example of encouraging scale up technology really anywhere. It seems very ad hoc, and it seems driven primarily by different companies or their boards or what they want to make investments in. Like I haven't seen somebody who's done that great. Like the thing that people always forget is that like, and I don't know how you get that perfect mix. Like Wyoming is very, very open for business. We have very good regulatory policy. We have very good tax policy. We have very good everything else. So like, if you compare us to the other 49 states in terms of like how easy it is to operate a business here and how low your taxes are and how low your like we should have to like be beating people off like with a stick at the border because they should be like clamoring to get in here to do business. And we're not. And so like we need to ask that fundamental question. And I don't know how it goes to answer it for Scott, but I think that part of it is having, I don't know if is Dr. Gilbert on this call?
No, I don't think so.
I'm here.
Are you?
Oh, okay.
You mind talking a little bit about how you guys through, like, remember when we started the conversation about attracting the right researchers and those systems start to build on each other? Kind of like you guys did in Boulder, or you did with the nursing program.
Oh, some of the different projects we did. Yeah. Well, for one thing, companies are not just shopping low taxes. And I hear that a lot out of many different places, and I have to give you a very strong health warning on that. That creates something that the accountants do in the finance office. That isn't something that the business buys into and they really want to stay. And if low taxes were everything, why in the heck would there be Silicon Valley? Because, oh my gosh, the business regulation and taxes in California are a major pain. If you talk to anybody, but they stay there. And why do they stay there? Because of the labor pool. And so that is one of the key things that you need to get right, and getting that lockstep and getting it right is very important. The other thing we identified in the latest study we did was the business culture in terms of supporting that is lacking. And, business is I hate to say it's a country club game. So if people don't know people that know people, they're not going to come to Wyoming, regardless of how low your taxes are. And if you're giving away money, well, the finance department will find something to take your money for of the company. But you're not going to have a long-term economic proposition. So what we look at there is building a scale-up infrastructure. One of the things we identified too that Wyoming lacks is the ability to commercialize and really grow companies. And if you're looking for a savior to come in, I think, Mark, you identified it very well. You're going to get the priority of a board and a CEO team, which may change with the next wave of things. And we've got a lot of instability in business. Commercialize and grow that locally and build that labor force.
Doug, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure, I'm Doug Gilbert. I'm with Lone Tree Academics, and we've done several studies in the Gillette area. The most recent of which was on Scale Up, which we did with the assistance of Babson College, which is one of the best entrepreneurship groups, I think, in the world. We were fortunate to get them in there. And realistically, in terms of what energy should they go for, I think they should be the everything to energy area. We had an interesting conversation in a conference I was in last week. There's a very massive nuclear power plant being built in Belarus, and it's not on most of our radars, but it was on these people's radars. And they said, how do we know we're buying power from that power plant or not? Well, currently they don't, but in 10 years they will, because it won't just be electrons coming across the wire, but they will have identifiers, much as we have the internet. So energy is changing. It's going toward electricity. It's going toward smart. And you really should be doing everything energy, including services. Oh my gosh, you can scale services in a number of months instead of in decades.
This is fascinating. Thank you so much for joining the call, Doug, and thank you for your contribution. That's really interesting. Phil, I think you were, you had unmuted yourself earlier. I thought maybe you wanted to say something.
Yeah, we, being that kind of development, a lot of times we're the front door to a lot of these places, and we do welcome anybody who comes to the community. We talk to them. On the backside, we do quite a bit of vetting. We do our due diligence. Well, we work with the University of Wyoming School of Energy because we don't understand the technology. So a lot of times my first phone call is to Richard Horner and run white papers and their technical information past him. And he's been very good at identifying technologies that just really don't work and others that really do. We were approached by a business at one time that wanted to come to the community, had some great ideas, good thoughts about coal to product types of things. Through our vetting, we worked with the Wyoming Business Council, did a Dun & Bradstreet search. We did a background investigation on some of the principals and found that one of the principals had a felony fraud conviction and was still on probation, which allowed us to say, well, thank you, but no thank you. So we do a lot of that background investigation. It's just that the people we're working with, I know they have to expect that we do that. It's just the smart thing to do. And so we do that very diligently, and it has helped us avoid some problems.
Thank you, Phil. Anyone else want to add anything? I think we're getting close to wrapping up. Now, we wanted to share with you next steps. Mark, did you want to add something?
I was just going to add, I think that Phil's correct. I think that with what's happening in coal and it being so dismal, I think that everybody's looking for some sort of savior. And that's not always the best timing for a community to fully vet things well. And I think that some of those people are trying to take advantage of that. I really think, to go back to Scott's question, I think that the best way Wyoming rolls out the carpet and prepare is that, like, we have in place the regulatory framework. And I think we need to network and work directly with DOE places that a lot of those decisions are made. And to Dr. Gilbert's point, where the introductions are made, these things are happening in Wyoming, they're happening in Campbell County. I think that those referrals go further than anything. And I think that we can leverage a lot of positive things here, but you still have to get in the door.
Yeah.
And I think that perhaps what needs to happen is, I don't know how they get the message out there, but maybe your guys' process here facilitates that. I don't know what the larger outcome will be, but if you're involving DOE, hopefully DOE will take note of the communities that are really forward thinking and looking to advance new technology.
I think that's part of the whole purpose of this process, Mark, of this IWEST process, is to do exactly that. So, yeah. Jim Hastings, we haven't heard from you. Do you have anything you'd like to contribute?
Well, I certainly do. I agree with the all energy and the research, the development, the manufacturing, and the transportation, everything that has to do with that. But our goal, when we talk about a net zero in the United States, which is impossible if we use wind and solar, because we know that even though the sun comes up every day. It costs something to acquire that energy from the sun. It costs something to acquire that energy from the wind, and those all have carbon footprints. And so if we talk about the United States, okay, those are part of what we need to discuss. But if we talk about the world, I don't understand why we're making an assumption that coal has to go away, because there are many places in the world that will never, or for years will never go away from coal, because they've got lots of coal, but their coal isn't as clean as ours. So why isn't there more support for the idea of shipping our low sulfur coal to other countries, so you reduce the footprint because you're using a different product?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else want to contribute, say any last words, any last thoughts? We are going to be posting this workshop online so that people can hear of all these different contributions that are being made, these different ways of thinking. And this conversation will continue. Selena, I'm going to turn it over to you, please, if you help us understand what the next steps are in this IWEST process, and maybe from SER as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to be using this feedback as we write up that technology report, that pathways to carbon neutral technologies in the Intermountain West, and using this feedback to understand what's important to the communities and what communities' goals and concerns are. And we are also, as Jess mentioned, developing a survey that's going to be hopefully going out in the next couple of weeks. So that will be another level of community engagement that'll be more broad throughout Wyoming. And we also want to continue these conversations. We've been talking about having more of this type of dialogues in different parts of Wyoming, and more of a statewide dialogue as well. So the IWEST project is running for about another year. We're going to be wrapping up that part of that project in about another year. Scott, did you want to add anything?
I think Phil wants to add something.
Right.
Oh. Yes.
One thing to consider when you're evaluating carbon neutral and the environmental impact of projects, you look at the whole picture. Wind towers look very nice, they look very clean, but disposing of the blades has become a major problem.
Yeah.
Mining the rare earth elements in China is incredibly messy and incredibly destructive. Mining lithium for batteries is a horribly dirty process. So the entire life cycle of these things need to be evaluated, not just from when that wind tower stands up to when it comes down. So make sure that that entire picture is looked at.
I appreciate that, Phil. I was just making a note there that that life cycle assessment is important for these carbon neutral technologies.
Thank you. Scott, do you want to wrap things up for us? Do you want to say anything?
Sure. Let me start by just saying thank you. I know we all have meeting fatigue. I know many of us were, not me, but I know others were on double meetings, triple meetings, and that's just the world we live in now. But this is such an important topic. Really appreciate your input. And as we wrap this up, it's going to go a long way, so we can communicate this to the rest of the Intermountain West and to the Department of Energy at large. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, everyone. Well, stay tuned. There are more workshops coming your way. The minute we can do this in person, the better. Phil, donuts will be involved. I don't think we can have an energy meeting now without donuts. So coffee will be involved. We really look forward to seeing you in the future. And thank you so much for taking all this time to spend with us and help us understand how Gillette is thinking about these things. So have a wonderful rest of your evening and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add thank you to DOE and to IWEST as well for funding this and for participating.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.